Good morning. My name is Claudia Marshall. This morning I am your worship associate. My pronouns are she and her. It is Martin Luther King weekend, and I honor that legacy and hope that we are spending our time safely marching or, if we can, volunteering. I know it is a hard time with this pandemic, but I urge you to find something useful you can put your hand to. Welcome to our weekly service of the Buckman Bridge Unitarian Universalist Church, or as we affectionately call it, BBUUC. Unitarian Universalism is a faith where you can bring your whole self, your full identity, your questioning mind, your expansive heart. For more information about Unitarian Universalism, please visit www.uua.org. Our chalice lighting this morning, Until All Means All, is written by Erica A. Hewitt. The chalice, as a symbol of Unitarian Universalism, arose as a beacon of hope in an atmosphere of tyranny. The chalice arose as a sign of promise that the marginalized would neither be forgotten nor ignored, because they are beloved and precious from the perspective of the holy. This morning, we remember all of the people who have been told explicitly or implicitly through police violence or governmental policy, through derision or dehumanization, that they're anything less than whole, anything less than beloved. As we each light a chalice in our homes, may we make of our lives a beacon, a symbol of our promise to draw the circle wide, a sign that we will not rest until all means all.
Hello, I am Reverend Amy Moses Lagos, and it is my great privilege to serve as the minister at Buckman Bridge Unitarian Universalist Church. I use the pronouns she and her. Our opening words this morning are written by Reverend Karen Johnston. Ancestors who spoke with bravest fire, lend us your senses, that we may know another world is on her way, breathed into life with our participation in her creation. Forebears who led the way when there was at first no way, lend us your persistence, your temerity, your assurance that the moral arc of the universe does indeed bend towards justice. Ones who went before us, sacrificing for a future not your own, help us to give of ourselves, that the common stones in our hands today might be cathedrals of compassion today, halls of restorative justice tomorrow, sheltering walls of beloved community the day after. It is Sunday morning, the day we gather. Let us be thankful and full of praise to be in the company of those who came before, yet are ever in our midst. Let us worship together.
Hello, welcome to the Wonder Box. It's so good to be with you. What might be in our box today? Let's see. It's a picture. Do you know who this is? This is the Reverend Egbert Ethelred Brown. He was the first Black person to be ordained a Unitarian minister. Today, Reverend Amy will be speaking about him. But first, we want to share a story with you that is found in our UU Tapestry of Faith curriculum called Finding Your Way, Ethelred Brown. It was written by Janine Grossmeyer. One morning, more than 100 years ago, on the island of Jamaica, a boy named Ethelred Brown went to church. Usually at this church, the people sang their creed, their list of what they believed. But that morning was Easter Sunday, a special Sunday. And so, instead of singing the creed, the pastor said it one line at a time, and the people would repeat it. This is some of what Ethelred heard. We believe the Father is God, the Son is God, and the Holy Spirit is God. And yet they are not three gods, but one God. So likewise, the Father is Lord, the Son Lord, and the Holy Spirit Lord. And yet not three Lords, but one. The unity in the Trinity and the Trinity in the unity is to be worshipped. And Ethelred thought, what? He liked math and he knew how to add. He knew that 3 wasn't the same as 1. How could you have a unity in Trinity or a Trinity in unity? How can 3 things be one thing? How can one thing be 3? It didn't make sense to him. So right there, sitting in church while everyone else was still saying they believed in the unity, a unity in Trinity and a Trinity in unity, Ethelred decided that he didn't believe that. He couldn't agree with what everyone else in the church was saying. He would have to find his own way. That afternoon, he went to his uncle's house, and on the table was a booklet with the words, "The Lord our God is one God." And Ethelred thought, yes, that makes sense. He borrowed the booklet from his uncle and took it home to read. That booklet was written by the Reverend William Ellery Channing, who was a Unitarian minister in the United States. After reading it and some other books, Ethelred decided he was a Unitarian too. But there were no Unitarian churches in Jamaica, and so Ethelred knew he would have to find his own way. So that's what he did for years and years. He still liked numbers, and when he was a grown-up, he became an accountant, helping other people keep good track of their money. He got married, and he and his wife had 4 children. Then, when Ethelred was 32 years old, he decided to become a Unitarian minister and start a Unitarian church in Jamaica. He didn't even know any other Unitarians, but Ethelred Brown didn't let that stop him. He found his own way. He wrote a letter to any Unitarian minister in New York City, and he put it in the mail. Eventually, he did get a letter back telling him he had to go to school in the United States to become a Unitarian minister. Now, Ethelred didn't have much money, and he'd never left Jamaica, but he didn't let that stop him. He found a way. He asked people to give him money. He said goodbye to his wife and children, then got on a boat to go to the United States. When he finally got to the United States, they didn't let him stay because he didn't have the right papers. Ethelred did not let that stop him. He found a way. He went back to Jamaica, fixed his papers, and saved more money. And finally, 3 years after he had decided to go, he arrived at the school. He spent 2 years there, learning to be a Unitarian minister, and he was ordained in 1912. He was the first Jamaican to go to that school. He was also the very first Black person to become a Unitarian minister. 100 years ago, that made a difference. Back then, people of different colors didn't mix. The teachers at the minister school told Ethelred that he couldn't be at a church with white people. They would want a white minister. Because he was Black, he had to be a minister at a church with Black people. Except there weren't any Unitarian churches with Black people. So the Unitarian teachers didn't think he could be a minister after all. But you know what? That didn't stop Ethelred. He found a way. He went back to his wife and children in Jamaica, and he started a Unitarian church there. It wasn't easy because the church didn't have many people or much money, and he didn't get much help from other Unitarians. But Ethelred made his dream of being a Unitarian minister come true. After 8 years, he decided to start another church, this time in the United States. He and his family moved to New York City, and he started the Harlem Community Church in 1920. It wasn't easy there either. They didn't have much money, and they still didn't get much help. His wife became sick, and one of his children died. Besides being a minister, Ethelred had to work long hours at an extra job he didn't like. But somehow Ethelred found a way. For the next 35 years, Ethelred was the minister at the Haarlem Community Church. Over the years, hundreds of people found their way there to pray and learn, worship and sing, just like we do at our congregation. In fact, one of the songs we sing has a tune named after the Reverend Ethelred Brown. It's in our Singing the Living Tradition hymn book, and it's called I'm on My Way. Ethelred Brown always found a way to find what he believed in, and so should we. Reverend Brown was a prophetic voice in our faith who embodies our fourth principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. I wonder, what lessons for your life do you find in his story? And with this, our story is told. Until the next time.
This is the time in our service when we pause to create sacred space in our hearts. We pause to reflect on the recent days with joys, sorrows, fears, gratitude, and love. We recall the milestones, the changes in our lives, and those who need our healing thoughts. Our community is deepened through sharing. We light a candle of joy this morning for my son, Carlos, and the Moses Lagos family. I am so excited to share with you that after several months of advocacy, Carlos started receiving in-person services at school 3 days a week for 90 minutes each day. He's doing great and he's having a lot of fun. Here in Seattle, public schools are all online, but Carlos, because of his disability, hasn't been able to access online school, so we've had to work really hard to fight for his right to an education during the pandemic. We light a flame of farewell to Jim W., who moved to Atlanta in December, just in time to register to vote. He will be coming to St. Augustine now and then and will visit when we open again. Our best wishes to you, Jim, and thanks for your dedicated membership to BBUUC. You are missed. We light a flame of joy to celebrate the birthday of Meg A., whose special day is today, the 17th. We light a candle this morning for all those experiencing pain, grief, anger, and more in response to the insurrection that occurred in the Capitol earlier this month, and all those experiencing worry in anticipation of the days that are ahead of us. We light a candle of concern for those who have died, those who have experienced serious illness and suffering due to the COVID-19 virus, and their family members. I want to share with you the words of UUA President Susan Frederick Gray in her announcement on January 14th. She says this: "These realities are deeply traumatic. Fear and anger are normal responses. It is okay if you are not okay. I don't feel okay. Now is the time to lean into relationships of friendship, family, and faith. Connect and share with others, make art and music, engage in practices that feed your soul, and offer to yourself and others gentleness, compassion, and care." We light a final candle to hold all the joys and concerns that are present with us at this time and remain unspoken.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth, keepers of faith, makers of peace, and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are one. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage.
Our collection plate for this month was chosen because of its mission, which is feeding Northeast Florida residents. Feeding Northeast Florida provides food and hope to more than 1 out of 6 people living in our 8-county service area who struggle to feed themselves and their families. The work to find solutions to address the issues of food insecurity and provide essentials. I encourage you to support this organization by clicking on the link provided. And thank you for anything that you can do for your support.
In 1875, a child named Egbert Ethelred Brown was born in Falmouth, Jamaica. He was the eldest of 5 siblings. As a child, Ethelred showed signs of the preacher he would one day become. He would often gather his siblings together and give speeches to them. His family attended the Montego Bay Episcopal Church, and Brown really enjoyed attending church and Sunday school. He was a curious and inquisitive child. One Easter Sunday, when Brown was a teenager, the priest and the congregation recited the Athanasian Creed, which states the doctrine of the Trinity. And it struck Brown that didn't make any sense to him. Brown recalls that that same afternoon he visited his uncle and found his uncle had a copy of a sermon on the subject of Unitarianism, written by the famous Unitarian preacher William Ellery Channing. The words of this sermon really resonated with Brown, and he wrote later, "I followed up by reading other Unitarian literature, and as a result, I became a Unitarian without a church." The Unitarian Universalist minister and historian, Reverend Mark Morrison Reed, tells the story of Ethelred Brown in great detail in the book entitled Black Pioneers in a White Denomination. And that is where I learned the story I am sharing with you. Morrison Reed tells Brown's story in a chapter entitled A Dream Aborted: Egbert Ethelred Brown in Jamaica and Harlem. Ethelred Brown married a woman named Ella Matilda Wallace, and they had 6 children together. He worked for several years as a civil servant in the Treasury Department of Jamaica. In 1907, he was fired from that job, which caused a crisis for him in his life. It was at that time that he decided to pursue his call to ministry. He faced a really difficult decision when he decided he wanted to be a minister. He was familiar with the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and he knew it would be a smooth path for him to become an AME preacher. But he couldn't follow that path and stay true to his Unitarian beliefs. But on the other hand, he knew there was a Unitarian church, but it was a predominantly white church in the United States, and he would encounter a lot of obstacles in trying to become a Unitarian minister. He wrote a letter addressed to any Unitarian minister in New York City, seeking information about pursuing ministry. The letter eventually found its way to Franklin Southworth, who was the president of the Unitarian Seminary Meadville Theological School. Brown was accepted into Meadville and decided that he had to follow his conscience and enroll at Meadville, even though he knew it was going to be a harder path. He became the 7th Black person to attend Meadville. He thrived at Meadville. He enjoyed the academic life, and he formed lasting relationships with other students at the school. He was ordained as a Unitarian minister in 1912. Brown then embarked on a new project to bring a Unitarian mission to Jamaica. At the beginning, he received some financial support for this project from the American Unitarian Association. He met with a small group of worshipers in his home on Sunday mornings and gave lectures to larger crowds on Fridays and Saturdays. But he struggled to help his church grow in size and membership. In addition, he encountered paternalistic attitudes and racial prejudice from the white Unitarians in the United States who he was relying on for help and support. He spent 2 years in Montego Bay and 6 years in Kingston. He was active politically in Jamaica. He was very involved in the trade union movement. He believed his faith called him to participate in struggles for social and economic justice. Eventually, the American Unitarian Association withdrew its support for the Jamaica mission, and Brown and his family had to leave for the United States. Mark Morrison Reed writes the following: Brown's idealism, his expectation of a better world, of an education for his children, of an enlightened religion for blacks, and his inability to make his ideals a reality because of racial prejudice and social intransigence are truly tragic. He confronted the same dilemma time and time again in his life. This man possessed a vision, and he never ceased following it. It was his vision and hope that took him to New York City and Harlem, the Black Mecca. Brown traveled to New York with a dream of bringing liberal religion to the Black community. He went with hope and high expectations. He worked with others to found the Harlem Community Church. But again, as in Jamaica, he struggled to help the church grow in members and influence. He had to work other jobs to financially support his family. He worked as an elevator operator and later as a speaker for the Socialist Party. He continued to have a very strained relationship with the American Unitarian Association. They gave him only limited financial support. He encountered hardship in his life due to the structural racism in the United States and in the Unitarian movement. I want to share with you a quote from a blog post written by Reverend Dr. William Sinkford, minister at First Unitarian Portland in Oregon, who served as the president of the Unitarian Universalist Association from 2001 to 2009. He writes the following about Ethelred Brown. There were no Unitarian churches which would consider him for a position. So in 1920, Ethelred Brown created a storefront Unitarian church in Haarlem, the Haarlem Community Church, which remained in existence for 20 years. That church received grudging recognition from the Unitarian National Office, never public, and virtually no financial support. During this period, the Unitarians were busy supporting new upper middle class churches for white members in the growing American West and even the South. End of quote. As Brown was ministering to the Haarlem Community Church, he was facing incredible hardship in his family life. His wife Ella was struggling with memory loss and confusion. One of his sons was mentally ill and committed to an asylum. And then, in 1929, his eldest son died by suicide. I can't imagine how painful and devastating this must have been for Ethelred Brown. It is heartbreaking beyond words. And to add to this devastation, there were some Unitarian ministers who responded to Brown's hardships with callousness or indifference. I am relieved to say, though, that there were many people in Brown's life who responded to his situation with kindness and compassion. The members of the Haarlem Community Church came together and wrote an appeal to send out to get financial support for Brown's family. The well-known Unitarian minister John Haynes Holmes reached out and provided moral and financial support. Although Brown was going through an incredibly hard time, he didn't go through it alone. Shortly after the death of his son, the Unitarian Ministerial Fellowship Committee started taking steps to take away Brown's fellowship as a Unitarian minister. The reasons they gave, as far as I could tell, one was that they were concerned that Brown was working at jobs outside of the ministry. And secondly, they were concerned that he was requesting money from other congregations and Unitarian leaders. They dismissed him from fellowship as a minister. But he fought his case, and he even retained an attorney from the ACLU, and his fellowship was reinstated. It is appalling beyond words that Unitarians committed to bending the arc of the universe towards justice were the perpetrators of such an injustice in this case. In spite of obstacles and setbacks, Brown continued to work as the minister at Haarlem Community Church. His church was a place of lively debates, political forums, and community activity. He was involved in supporting the civil and economic rights of Black Americans. He worked to maintain connections between Jamaica and the immigrant community in New York. He kept his church going until his death in 1956. Mark Morrison Reed writes, "He had been enlightened by liberal religion. It freed him and strengthened him with the hope that he might emancipate others. And in the end, he held on to the faith to which he had dedicated his life." Morrison Reed quotes Ethelred Brown as writing this: "When of my own free will I entered the ministry, I swore to remain a minister, for richer, for poorer, for better, for worse, until death. That oath I have kept for 40 years. God helping me, I shall keep it to the end." As Unitarian Universalists, we tell the story of our living tradition that includes the heroes, the leaders, and the ordinary people who make up the history of this movement. When ministers and leaders have recorded and shared the history of this faith, they have overemphasized the white, male, economically privileged leaders of the movement, to the detriment of people of color, women, and others with marginalized identities. Mark Morrison Reed wrote in the Unitarian Universalist World magazine, In 1979, 10 years after the 1969 General Assembly in Boston, almost no scholarship existed about African Americans in Unitarian Universalism, and some of what had been written was inaccurate. Ethelred Brown is a part of our living tradition. When we lose his history, we lose our history. When we tell his story, our understanding of our living tradition is enriched. Ethelred Brown was a brilliant, courageous, and incredibly persistent minister in the Unitarian faith. Hearing his story, I am inspired by how clear he was in his Unitarian beliefs, how deeply he was committed to liberal religion, and how he was willing to overcome obstacles to pursue his dream of bringing liberal religion to Black communities. When we learn his story, we also learn about how racism and white supremacy culture operated within the American Unitarian Association and within society, and how these things hindered Brown's work and caused harm to him and his family. I wonder if the American Unitarian Association had given Brown their full financial and moral support from the beginning of his mission in Montego Bay and his work in Harlem, how would the story of our living tradition be changed? What impacts would still be felt today? Unitarian Universalism has lost so much, and so much harm has been done because of racism and white supremacy culture. There are leaders in the movement today that are fighting, like Ethelred Brown, for a more diverse and inclusive Unitarian Universalism. I wonder where they're finding support. I wonder where they're finding resistance. As a white minister reading Ethelred's story, I am challenging myself to consider how the white ministers in the early 20th century responded to Brown. I am committing myself to listening to and following the lead of leaders in our movement who have marginalized identities, who are calling us to a more inclusive and equitable faith. Many leaders in our movement have articulated a vision of Unitarian Universalism that is multicultural, inclusive, anti-racist, and anti-oppressive. I believe in this vision, and I am committed to helping bring about this reality. Telling the story of Ethelred Brown is an important part of working towards this vision. It helps us understand the gifts that people with marginalized identities bring to our movement. And I think it's really helpful and important to see how the American Unitarian Association failed to support and in some ways actively worked against the leadership of a Black minister in our movement. We need to understand the mistakes that have been made and the harm that has been caused. We need to look at these mistakes and learn from them so that we can move forward in a way that is truly equitable and inclusive of all people. Ethelred Brown was a minister who believed deeply in the cause of liberal religion and worked tirelessly to share the message of the Unitarian faith with his communities in Jamaica and Harlem. His story inspires courage and commitment. His story is an example of how Unitarian leaders have caused harm to people of color in this movement. It highlights how important it is to listen to the people in our faith who have marginalized identities and to follow their leadership. The story of Ethelred Brown can help us as we work towards a vision of a movement that is truly anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and inclusive of people with diverse identities. It can help us engage in the work of racial justice in our congregation, our communities, and our country. Let us find inspiration in the stories of our brave and brilliant ancestors in the Unitarian Universalist tradition. May their lives and their stories help us to recommit ourselves to the work of racial justice in our communities. May we learn from the mistakes of the past to help bring about a more just future. May telling our stories strengthen our connections to one another and to the spirit of love that is at the heart of our faith. May it be so. Amen.
Morally, I was led to nonviolence because I felt that it was the best moral way to deal with the problem. We were seeking to establish a just society, and it was my feeling then, and it is my feeling now, that violence is certainly much more socially destructive, and it creates many more social problems than it solves. So I was led to nonviolence for deep moral reasons. And I turned to it because I felt that it was the morally excellent way to deal with the problem of racial injustice in our country.
There is no freedom, the wise man said, let justice roll down when the poor cry out for shelter and bread. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary? Walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Hatred will never drive out hate. Let love roll down, roll down. Remember, our hearts can make us great. Let love roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. And let your love roll down like a mighty stream. When brutality threatens our daughters and sons, let peace roll down, roll down. May our voices rise up louder than the guns. Let peace roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. And let peace roll down like a mighty stream. Step by step, one by one, let justice roll down, roll down. They can kill the prophet, but the dream lives on. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream.
I turned to it because I felt that it was the morally excellent way to deal with the problem of racial injustice in our country.
Our exit words are by Cynthia Landrum. Be true, be well, be loving. We leave this gathered community, but we don't leave our connection, our concerns, our care for each other, our service to each other, to the world, and to our faith continues. Until we are together again, friends, be strong, be well, be true, be loving. Namaste. Blessed be. Amen.